A warm welcome to OmniFocus and Notion workflows with Andy Bliss. And I'm really excited to have Andy here today and to look at how OmniFocus and Notion can be used together in many productive ways. And Andy certainly has a lot going on in his life, so it'll be great to unpack how he makes good use of these really powerful tools. Just before we get to Andy's session, just want to welcome you to Learn OmniFocus if you're joining for the first time. And this is a site that I formed back in June of 2014, shortly after OmniFocus 2 was released. And now we're getting ready for OmniFocus 4. And I really saw that a lot of people were kind of seeing the potential in OmniFocus and productivity methodologies and things like that. But sometimes getting a little stuck when it came to kind of putting them into practice, really making good use of the tools and the methodologies. So this is really where Learn OmniFocus was born. So the intention from the beginning has been to support all of you in living a fulfilling and productive life with some help from OmniFocus and complementary productivity apps. So today is an example of one of the Learn OmniFocus live sessions that we've been hosting for many years, pretty much since the beginning. And there's a number of different types of sessions. First of all, there are ones that focus around productivity themes, like I've done one on my holistic productivity approach. There's another one on procrastination that I did recently. So this is about kind of learning the soft skills in order to be able to use the technology effectively. There's also quite a few of these, and there's more to come on featured apps. So this is how to use OmniFocus alongside another app. So I've covered apps like MindNode and Draft, Asana, and as I mentioned, there's many more of these to come. And then just as is the case today, I always look forward to welcoming workflow guests, and I've had many guests over the years from many different disciplines and cultures and geographies and things like that. And this is really about kind of grounding the use of the technology, looking at how people actually use it in their day-to-day work and in different scenarios. And even if your profession is quite different or you live in a different part of the world, I think you'll find there's something that you can apply to your life and work that's really valuable. So I'm sure today's session will be no exception there. I also really enjoy getting to know you in smaller groups. So I do interactive group sessions, and these consist of office hours, which are limited to 10 participants. And there's also virtual co-working, which is an opportunity to come and work alongside other amazing people in our community. So if you haven't checked out one of those, I highly recommend giving those a go. So a little taste of what's coming down the pike. So first of all, I'm really excited to welcome Mike Williams to Learn OmniFocus. That'll be on May 3rd. It's a 90-minute session. Mike and I decided there was so much to cover, we stretched out to 90 minutes. And if you're not familiar with Mike Williams, he's the former CEO of the David Allen Company. He's also been in leadership roles at General Electric, Zappos, and he's written a book called Doing to Done, which is really taking all of what he's learned over the years and distilling it into something that's got a lot of power, but a lot of simplicity as well too. And he specifically speaks to overwhelm in the work that he does, as in the book and as the coaching and the workshops that he leads. So he's going to be introducing us to the Doing to Done approach during this session. And we'll get the opportunity to see how that can be applied using OmniFocus. So really looking forward to this. And as a little kind of teaser, he shared 5 facts about himself, and there's one of them that's false and the rest are true. So the first one is he's seen Bruce Springsteen over 30 times. He swam from Alcatraz to San Francisco. He met Oprah Winfrey. He owned a funky thrift store with his wife. And he lived in an Airstream park for 3 years with a llama named Merle. So I don't even know which one of these is false. So you can maybe think between now and May 3rd, see, maybe we'll do a little poll. I see we've already got a poll going on in the chat here. So so that's one of many great reasons to join the session on May 3rd. There's 3 office hour sessions scheduled for this month on the 11th, 20th, and 26th. And I try to vary the days of the week and the times to hopefully accommodate as many people as possible. But if you're finding that the dates and times generally don't work, definitely let me know and I'll see what I can do. And virtual co-working, to give you an idea of how this works, there's 3 25-minute focus sessions built into the 90-minute session. There's a welcome at the beginning where you can set your intention for the focused work that you're going to be doing. And then there's a check-in with the group in between the focus sessions. And then at the end, there's a wrap-up to celebrate what you did accomplish and acknowledge what you learned, what kind of got in the way, what are some things you can apply in the future. So it's something I think that has to be experienced to be understood, but people often come to these and say this was the 90 most productive minutes of my week, and it's incredible how much can be accomplished during that time when you bring that intentionality. And if by scheduling this too, you're putting a meeting on your calendar, so you can legitimately tell people that I'm in a meeting, I'm not available right now. And if you want to come a little early, you can join the social time. I call it the lounge, and then keep that going for 10 minutes afterwards as well, so we can all get to know each other. And you can learn more about that at learnomnifocus.com/VC. There's 4 of these open for registration this month, and I'm going to be adding May dates for both virtual co-working and office hours probably in the next few days. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of the fun, if you go down to the bottom of the learnomnifocus.com/live page, you'll see there's a place where you can subscribe on your calendar, and that'll show you things in your time zone. And within the appointments, you'll see there's a link to the registration page, and then there's a little summary so you can see what that session is about. OmniFocus 4 continues to progress very nicely. I've been following that very closely. And they're kind of getting to the point where they're refining the user interface, and then there'll be some bugs fixing and things to do. So I definitely plan to have some content specific to OmniFocus 4 ready to go very soon after the official release. And there hasn't been any specific date for the official release, but I know the Omni group are really working really hard to get that ready to launch. And I know many of you are using the test flight version at the moment too, and finding that works really well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Andy Bliss. And I first met Andy back in 2019. We were both at a conference in the Chicago area, and we had many great conversations about technology and many other subjects and productivity as well. So I'm really happy that he agreed to be on today. And he's joining us from Knoxville, Tennessee in the USA. And if you're not sure where Knoxville is, I've put it on the calendar on the map for you rather. So it's about halfway between Nashville and Tennessee and Charlotte, North Carolina. And Andy Bliss is a very multifaceted, very talented fellow. He's a music professor. He's a musician. He has a very strong technology background, and it's one of those things where it really showcases how far things can be taken if you have both the creative skills and the technology skills. So he'll be really talking to that today. And if you want to follow what Andy's doing, in addition to looking at his blog, you can also follow him on social media on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Andy was also recently on the Omni Show. That's a really great interview if you haven't checked that out already. And that's number 106. And if that wasn't enough, Andy's the founder of Nief-Norf, which is a nonprofit. I'm sure he'll be talking about that as we go through as well. And you can check that out at nief-norf.org. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Andy's going to be talking about OmniFocus and Notion. And OmniFocus is certainly a great app, but it doesn't do everything in the productivity realm. And that's where we rely on other apps. And he's specifically going to be speaking to Notion and how that fits in alongside OmniFocus and into the productivity system in general. And if you're not familiar with Notion, you can check it out at notion.so and create a free account there, which is actually very capable even on the free tier. And you'll get certainly a good taste of it today as we go through. All right. Well, without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass it over to you. So take it away, Andy.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'm really flattered to be here, and thank you so much to Tim for the invitation. I've been a huge fan of Learn OmniFocus for quite some time now, and I've actually really enjoyed kind of preparing for this presentation. It's always nice to have an excuse to go through your system and sort of review how and why you're doing things. And so I'm excited to speak with you all today. I thought we'd just talk a little bit about what I do for work to maybe contextualize some of the things we're going to talk about today. I'm probably going to move through this somewhat quickly so we have as much time as possible to talk about Notion and OmniFocus. But I am a percussionist, which by definition means I play everything that is not a violin or a trumpet. And this is a project that I directed a few years ago. You can see me there in the middle, ripping large sheets of paper. And this is a piece by Michael Pizarro, who's at Cal Arts at the moment, I believe, as a professor, called A Wave and Waves for 100 musicians. And I directed this at the Knoxville Museum of Art as part of the Big Ears Festival, which just happened here last weekend here in town. And somewhere along the lines, I sort of in my professional life figured out how to put a puzzle of this size together. Some other things that I do, I'm just going to I've got a quick video that I'm going to talk over here. I always believe a picture is kind of worth 1,000 words. I host talks, as you can see here. I play percussion in a lot of contexts, whether it's as a soloist. That project there, I was conducting the Bang on a Can All-Stars, which is a chamber group, but my students were also involved. You can see all the items on stage there, including a head of lettuce and a laptop computer with technology that was needed. This piece here has a bunch of lumber with contact microphones. So it's a pretty multifaceted life as a percussionist in general. And when you add into that being a professor and being in charge of curriculum design, teaching students, and then also running a nonprofit, which gets into things like fundraising, grant writing, programming concerts, all kinds of things. It's a really, really interesting life, and no week is the same. So I have a little blog on my website. I try to keep up with. You can see here I dove into MindNode a bit for those of you who are familiar with that platform. And I've also been re-outfitting my studio as of late. So you can see just some posts here where I'm highlighting a few of the many pieces of technology that I have kind of picked up along the way. So we're going to be talking about Notion today. And for those of you who have never seen Notion, I just wanted to get a clip of it up here right away. So this is a page in my Notion, I guess, database or in my workspace called What I'm Doing Now. It's just a very simple page with some text, a couple headers, some color, and a divider line, just to kind of show you what Notion looks like. This is kind of a cool space that I built that I can just share with people outside of work. I have a pretty serious Lego hobby. We have an adult Lego club here in Knoxville that I'm the president of, where we do custom builds and display them, kind of like an artist display for the public. People bring their children. It's a lot of fun. And then I also have our very first run-in with a database in Notion for the afternoon. This just happens to be a very simple one with some things that I'm consuming at the moment and a single select field under format there that tells me what format the media is in, whether it's a book or an online course or an article. And you can see immediately I'm able to gather that info in the database, and we're going to look at what kinds of things we can do with that. So just wanted to give a quick outline for today. I always like when I'm in a session if I kind of know what the roadmap is. As I said, we're going to do a little introduction, which we just did. And I'd like to just talk a little bit about my system overview and how I've gotten to where I am today and the journey I've been on. It's never a straight line, as we all know. And then we're going to get into some Notion workflows. We will probably have less OmniFocus examples today, but I'm definitely going to touch on that, obviously, and we'll be speaking about OmniFocus all the way through the session in terms of how I use it. I've been using it for a very long time. And then my favorite part is the discussion where maybe we could exchange some ideas and tips and tricks and ideas around how we get our work done throughout the day. Onward, here we go. So the first one, the system overview. I had a neighbor as a child in the 80s who worked for Apple, which was really, really cool. My 2 doors down, there were 2 boys that I played with in our cul-de-sac. We played wiffle ball, etc. in the 80s, and we owned the Apple IIe in my dad's little office area in the split foyer basement. I still remember playing Jeopardy on floppy disk, and I believe Oregon Trail, which coincidentally my son is studying in school this week. So he's been talking about that at home. Eventually, we were fortunate enough to have like the friends and family. I think he had like 5 bundles to get a discount on every year or something like that. And my dad and our neighbor were friends, and he was very generous to extend that to us. So we ended up with I believe it was the Macintosh SE. And I know that there was one more Mac after that. So I grew up with Macs in the house, which is something I look back on as being very fortunate. As I slide ahead, I worked at Best Buy in the computer area in high school, and I actually started as a computer science major in college. And if you fast forward to 2004, I was starting my master's degree in Lexington, Kentucky, and I bought my first Mac, the iMac G4. Right there. It was around that time that I think I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, which opened up kind of the personal productivity vault that we all have swam around in and discovered. So it was around this time, a few years later, that OmniFocus came into my life. I was in graduate school, and I'm trying to juggle all the classes and increasing responsibility as an adult. As someone who now mentors graduate school, I think it's a really formative time for students because they're starting to have professional obligations, but they're also still a student. And there's a lot that happens during that time. So I was digging around trying to remember when I got this, and I actually pulled this up in my email a night or 2 ago and found this receipt. And so it was 2010 that I bought my first copy of OmniFocus. So it's been with me for a while now, and it has been very strong and very definitely my most used tool. I have used some of the other products from the Omni group, OmniGraffle probably being the biggest use. I'm by no means an expert, but here's an example as a percussionist of how I've deployed OmniGraffle at different times in my career. You can see this is used as a stage plot where I'm showing the backline that I'll be needing as I come in for a presentation in terms of what instruments, where they will be, where the music stands might go, where I'm running power, all of those things, so that often we have very little time to set up before a performance, and sending something like this over can be really, really useful. So I found, the Omni Group's tools to serve me in a lot of different ways. I also have messed around with OmniPlan, though it's been a long time, and I found at the time it wasn't very shareable. So I at one point did like a whole outline of my kind of annual calendar in there. Omni Outliner is, I get a lot of those usages out of Notion now, which we're going to see. I've been a long time user of the iWork suite. Like many of us in the kind of 2008 era, I was deep into Evernote. I have to go back and figure out when iWeb launched, but I remember having a website with iWeb in like 2003. I think that's correct. So used iWeb a lot before some of the newer tools came out. I've always worked out of mail. I've never really worked directly in any other platform for email. And as Tim mentioned, I used Asana with my nonprofit team at Nief-Norf for several years. So lots of different apps, like many of you out there watching probably, and trying to figure out kind of how to make them all, work seamlessly together. It was a few years later that I stumbled upon Learn OmniFocus. And I think it was really the first time I did any kind of like digital learning on my own, really outside of school, where I sort of like took a course and like dove in. I had a winter where I really binge watched a lot of Tim's content. I think he's a real master teacher. And it was so great to become friends later when we met in person. But I've definitely spent a lot of time on the site learning from all the other guests and, just the principal videos that are on there about everything from tags to projects to templating and automation. And through some of those workflow guests, I got turned on to Mac power users, which then opened the deluge of apps into my life. This was probably in the mid 2010s. And I was really excited learning about all these different things. I'm not going to speak about all these right now. But I remember there are still some apps that are on my list, Keyboard Maestro, the ones on the top, especially that I have that I would love to be getting more use out of if I could ever find some extra time. And the ones on the bottom I know are extremely powerful: Craft, Obsidian, and DevonThink, but I actually have not. Notion is serving that purpose for me in a lot of ways, and I just haven't had the need or the time to get into those, but someday would love to kind of check them out a little further. A quick mention, I do use a lot of these apps as well here: Ableton, Sensory Percussion, Sibelius is a notation software, and then some audio video tools in my workflow. These are obviously not the focus for today, which is why I'm flying through them, but it's always kind of nice to see what people have in their tool belt in case it's inspiration to folks for further research down the road. I was out mowing my lawn. I have this very clear memory one day, and I remember wishing to myself that I could find some way to build like a Andy Bliss HQ or a dashboard, or I felt like I needed a kind of strategy or best practice or sort of standard operating procedure for how information was coming into my life and which one of these apps that I've now become fairly passionate about, like in which use case I would use which one. I remember feeling really excited about everything that I had, but unclear as to what the path through them would be. And this for me is really where Notion came into play. So I'd like to get into the second part now and dive into Notion. As I said, I know that was a bit of a fast fly through, but just a little bit about my background and what I've been doing in the tech space over the last 15 or 20 years, I suppose. So I've got a number of case studies that we're going to dive into, but for me, Notion is really about the personal knowledge management, or PKM that a lot of us have probably heard about. I do feel like there's been a bit of a information or technology renaissance happening in the last few years. And it occurred to me getting ready to speak today that I think that GTD is to OmniFocus as building a second brain is to Notion. And what I mean by that is we have all these buckets of knowledge that we're consuming. I actually am listening to Building a Second Brain on audiobook over the last month, and heard a really interesting statistic that we're consuming, it's no surprise, exponentially more information per hour per day than ever before in human history. And this puts us into uncharted waters in terms of overwhelm, in terms of mental health, in terms of digital clarity and not hoarding information digitally to bury it in Evernote and never see it again. And I think this is a question many of us are wrestling with, is like, how do we capture these thoughts and this information, but most importantly, have it come back up through the system and reveal itself at precisely the right moment, where that piece of information, along with 4 others that we've collected over the years, can allow us to come up with perhaps a unique thought, or at least a collection of thoughts that we might want to then take and do something with in our work, whether it's write an article or become a lesson plan as a teacher or deploy as a new product for our company. There are many, many use cases, of course, for that. So This journey for me started when my graduate student turned me on to Airtable, probably around 2017. And specifically the relational databases that Airtable is able to do. I found that to be really, really interesting. You know, if you haven't used Airtable, you can make a database and you can have several properties, and then you can make another database and you can make those two talk to each other. So let's see, a simple use case might be holiday gifts that you want to give, and where you're going to buy them and how much they cost. And then a second database with all the people that you want to give a gift for. And then you could tie those two things together. We could do this all day long. Maybe you want to put an outfit together from your closet, and you could put all your items in there and then the outfits, and you could tie those things together. You can do this for hours. So Airtable, I still use. Actually, it's becoming kind of the back end of my university's work structure because of its strength with forms and automation. The staff here has been doing all kinds of things to increase efficiency. And it's a really, really wonderful tool. But I kept hearing about Notion, and I dove in. And a couple of years ago, I ended up diving into a few tools, one by August Bradley, who I wanted to make sure I noted today. If you're unfamiliar with him, he has a wonderful YouTube channel and teaches the pillars, pipelines, and vaults system. I think I've watched every single video on his channel, broken them down. I took a lot from that, and all of that content is available for free on his channel, which is extremely generous. And then he has some courses now that he offers as well. Really insightful stuff. And then also Marie Poulin's course, Notion Mastery. I think she kind of comes at Notion from a slightly different angle, which was really cool. And I really, really have enjoyed that course. It's actually all taught in Notion. So if you're looking for resources after today's talk, those are definitely two places that I would recommend. So I have 6 case studies here. The first one I've got built into our slide deck here, and then we're going to get a little crazy and go directly to Notion on our own and swim around in there and see what it looks like. So this first one, though, is kind of a, I guess, beginner or simple example. Just again, in case somebody is brand new to Notion, I didn't want to jump in too quickly. And this is just about my areas database. And by areas, I mean our pillars, our roles, our areas of responsibility that is discussed in getting things done. We have to know what buckets essentially to create in our life. And so I just thought I would show you mine, and then also just quickly show you how we can type into that and some of the types of things we can do with text. So here's, kind of a graphic from MindNode. I think I got this idea from Tim in his videos a long time ago. And it's, if we're a student and we have school and we have our personal life and we have a chamber ensemble, this is, some of the things we may want to. So this is what my areas dashboard looks like in Notion. And you'll notice that there it says Pillars Gallery underneath. And that's because the databases in Notion, once built, can be viewed in like 6 different ways, which is one of the things that makes it so incredibly powerful. So I'm just going to let this video run, showing you here that I'm under my personal Notion workspace, and those are some of the, I guess, table of contents I use. But this is the list view we might be more familiar with. Tim, you'll see I have some hook marks in there from OmniFocus as thanks to our work in the last 2 weeks. And I can also put it in a Kanban board and slide these things around and see them in a slightly different way. And each of those, this is my favorite thing about Notion, is I can click on any of these and it opens up a page where I can then begin putting all kinds of stuff in. And while OmniFocus has the notes field, that's one of the big things that I've found to be so helpful for me in Notion. So now we're just going to do some experimenting here. I'm sorry this is sped up, but I just wanted you to see me work. You can drop text in and do a header or a toggle list there. I had an action item that I'm just kind of quickly going in. Now I'm going to turn it into a quote, and I could type a quote in, extra points if you can name the source for that quote. And then maybe I want to change the icon next to the quote. And maybe I want to actually add another quote. So I'm going to change the layout to be a couple of columns. Maybe I'm feeling a trend here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a second quote from a similar movie. And I'm going to change the background color so that it stands out. And now I have these two. You can just kind of quickly see how the page layout works. So now I'm going to create a page to type into. So I have a blank workspace here. We're going to call this Star Wars. And I'm just going to start randomly typing some goofy text in here. And again, this is very fast, but if you've never seen Notion before, I just thought it was important that you had a moment to just kind of see it in motion. So I'm creating a quick list of some of my favorite characters from Star Wars, and I'm going to go ahead and name some. And my second property here, I'm going to keep, these are all the things those properties can be: a date, a checkbox, a URL, an email address. I don't have Luke Skywalker's email address, so we're going to leave it as a multi-select. And we're going to say he was episode 4. I know we use Roman numerals, but I thought we could use a brain break today. So I'm going to just name off 3 Star Wars characters and one of the movies that they showed up in. But now maybe I just want to filter that list to only see the first 2 trilogies because maybe I'm not a fan of the sequels. And now I want to reorder these things. I could change the colors on those episodes. Maybe I change my mind and decide I want to add all of them back in. And this is how Notion works in real time. Actually, not real time, it's sped up. And now maybe I have some other Star Wars content I want to link to. I happen to be a Lego Star Wars collector for minifigs. This is a page I already had where I was building kind of a database of this collection with my 10-year-old son. And here are some of the characters we already had. And you can just see how these pages like balloon and grow very, very quickly and very, very seamlessly, which is a feature of Notion that I've really enjoyed quite a bit. So I'm going to delete all this now because that was just a demo. That's going to go away. And now here we are right back where we started on this is the first page I see when I come into my Notion workspace every day. I have a quick notes capture there at the bottom. And in this example, we've basically just covered some of the property types in the databases very, very quickly. Some of the view types and just some of the ways that grouping and sorting and filtering can work, which will help us as we continue this discussion looking at some other things. So case study number 2 is also a fairly simple example of how Notion can be used and how I used it. And this is going to be, any productivity system obviously needs some kind of a review and goal setting system. And the system I'm using is a hybrid of August Bradley's system and Marie's. She calls it Horizons, which is something I really liked and borrowed. She gives you the templates in her course when you pay for it. And so this is kind of the quantified self, where Notion has the ability for things to roll up because of the database usage, which is, again, one of the reasons that I really love it. If we type a Google Doc and we type a bunch of text in, or an Evernote document or whatever, that's great, but we have no way to like slice and dice that information. And the relational databases that I've mentioned already today, it can become really, really helpful. This is the database that I just was showing you, my areas. So I'm going to just go over here and you'll see my menu shows up. And I'm going to move down here to Horizons. I'll just let this stay open for a minute. You can see my Learn OmniFocus project that I've favorited there. That's one I've been working in. And I'll actually dive in here for just a second to show you. This is the talk that I'm delivering right now and how I was able to prep it in Notion. And I have this over on my other screen in a second Notion window. It's been extremely helpful as I've gotten through this. So our second case study is about relational databases and templates. So I used to do my startup routine every morning and my shutdown routine every afternoon out of OmniFocus. And that is completely possible. And there are many people who do it and do it very, very well. But one of the things that I love in Notion is the ability to use templates. And so I thought, this is my journal database. which is a database basically of every single day. It's if I were to unfilter this, you would see a list of day after day after day. But again, what's cool about these database fields is I can click this open button, which I'm going to do in just a minute, and then I can go inside that day and do a whole bunch of things. And that's really, for me, where the power comes in Notion that I've not really found in a lot of other platforms. But again, pulling from Notion Mastery, I have my data basement down here. And these are my other databases that I'm using. There's a weeks database. If I click on this, you'll just see a list of weeks. And those are relationally, whenever we see this arrow, paired to the month of June, if that makes sense to everybody. So I have the month of June tied to these weeks in June. And if I were to click on this over in the months database right there, I'm going to go back into weeks, but that's where this is about to pull from. And click on June, open that up. Because this is a database entry, it has all this stuff at the top. If it was just a page, we would just start kind of down here on this part. But because it's a database, you can see June as a month is tied to, you guessed it, the relational database for quarters, and there's another one for years. We can also see, I'll drag this up here, that it's tied to these weeks. So, and finally, that it's tied to the year 2023. And what this allows me to do is roll up a ton of information as I do kind of my daily review each day and each week. So let's back out here and go to back up to that. And let's just open today. I waited to do this for today. And you can see this is already somewhat pre-populated. We're in the week of April 3rd currently. Today is the 6th. It's a Thursday. And one of the things I try to do on Thursdays is theme my days, and I try to do things with our community at Nief-Norf, outreach, different, meetups on Zoom on Thursdays. And so this actually fits in very nicely with today's meeting. So I have a number of templates here. I can start a new template, which just gives me this blank space where I could type in like the 3 things I did today. And then that could pop up for me. But obviously you can take that much, much further. We're going to go back and I'm going to choose my Thursday review template. And this is going to fire all of that right into this page for me. So again, we're still up here on this Thursday entry right here. But now I can go down and walk through my morning startup. And I found all of this being unclogged and out of OmniFocus actually makes OmniFocus feel so much more powerful to me because I'm able to really use it to keep track of, those very specific deadlines. So some of my favorite videos that I've ever watched on Learn OmniFocus and just generally on YouTube are where people actually take you through some of these examples. So we're going to fly through this very quickly. What would make today great? Meet a new friend on Learn OmniFocus Live. And I'm going to refer to my weekly focus that I preset when I set up this week to make sure I'm staying in line with my goals for the week. Sure enough, I'm going to open this full screen so we can see it a little bit better. Sure enough, this week, my focus was preparing for today's talk. That's, of course, probably not surprising. Also, my mom is visiting for the holiday weekend. So when I'm done here today, I'm going to be spending some time with her over the weekend, which is great. So my priority is in line with kind of what I told myself on Sunday that my focus would be. We're just going to say I've already reviewed my time blocks in Fantastical. And Tim, this is where I'm experimenting now underneath view today's action items. I used to have a big table here from Notion with tasks, but I've since moved back to, and this, sure enough, clicks us into my OmniFocus database. One click, ready to go using Hookmark, and boom, I'm right into where I want to be. I can go to the forecast, look at today, and see what I need to be doing. I find that to be extremely powerful and to reduce a lot of friction when I'm just trying to fly through some things. Part of my morning startup also includes a not to-do list. Maybe I made some improvements on past journals where I said I want to be better about drinking water or something like that. Then I get to my mindset work. Again, want to credit August Bradley. Some of this came from him, and really enjoyed hearing what he has to say. So I'm grateful to get to spend time this weekend with my mom and family. And I can click on this mindset page to maybe give me some friendly reminders about things that I found inspirational quickly. If I want to look at that, I can do some visualization. Then we can move down to the quantifiable self. My morning log last night, I was up later than I should have been trying to get ready for today. And I was woken up by my daughter who had a sick stomach at 6:30. These are the journeys we go on as parents. And so that will actually spit out a formula and tell me how many hours I slept, which I can look at another spot. I can also track my fitness. I have not worked out today. I'm going to play pickleball later this evening. But when I'm done tonight, I could just take a glance at this and fill some of these things in. So I can have this morning checklist, and then that's kind of this whole first section. That doesn't take me very much longer than it just did in the mornings. And then I have like a flow chart that I can follow throughout the day to make sure I check in on Slack at some point. I'm on a Sibelius software beta test. I'm a member of Pat Flynn's SPI Pro community, and I like to try to remember to dive in there. I've worked with a coach, and I want to remember to ask and try to get my value out of that amidst a very busy week, et cetera, et cetera. These things float away when we get busy with tasks and our calendar fills up. And so they're just some friendly reminders there. And I'm going to skip these things, but I can have custom lists depending on the day and what kind of batching I'm trying to do each week for the day. And finally, my shutdown routine can be right here. And all of this can be ready to go. The single most effective productivity tip I've ever received and followed through on is time blocking tomorrow before I go to sleep. On the days that I do that, I'm like Superman, and I almost never miss when all I have to do is jump the hurdles and not figure out where to set them up in real time throughout the day. So that's just a quick demo, maybe not quick, but a deep dive, I guess, for now into my journaling kind of case study number 2. This replaced day 1 for me and started to consolidate some of those apps. I love day 1. I think it's an amazing platform, but having all this in one place was really powerful. And it's also an example of relational databases and templates and how powerful they can be in Notion. Would like to jump into OmniFocus a little bit here and just kind of, I started to allude to some of this, but I always love seeing people's setups. There's a lot of this covered on the Learn OmniFocus website already, but I use some pretty normal tags. I think some of my favorite ones are weekly contexts, where I've been trying to batch certain work I do around finance or around writing on Tuesdays. And I also do some, like scheduling on Fridays. So if I click on the system thing, I would like to get Readwise installed. So as I'm processing my email there, I'm able to get on top of that. And then I maybe need to make a text expander snippet. When I'm in that headspace, I try to push that to Friday. Here's a quick look at my projects. I mentioned these routines just a moment ago with Notion. Those have now moved out of here and cleaned up my system a little bit. And I'm thanks to Learn OmniFocus and the last presentation, I'm kind of toying around with the Johnny Decimal system a little bit. I'm brand new to it, but I kind of like the idea of these numbers corresponding in OmniFocus and Notion, and knowing that anytime I type in 50, it's going to be some of my professional work under Bliss Labs, or 60 is like performance-based work that I'm doing. So if I open up my music category here, you can see some of my teaching things as a professor are starting to show up. I have a tickler task here to run a kickoff project, which I have as a template built into my system. And then this is another example of the back end of a template that I'm running using the automation features here that OmniFocus offers, where we just did a concert on March 23rd. But one of the things I love about OmniFocus is I noticed that There's a lot of things that I wasn't able to follow up on because a lot of times we get done with the thing and then we immediately move on. And sometimes there's follow up that we forget to get to. For example, I would like to send the composers a concert program. If we played some music by them, want to make sure that the videos actually get edited and posted to YouTube. And so this is just like the back end of a larger template that I have up here in my templates folder. And I found these to be extremely useful for some of my use cases. My favorite part about OmniFocus is probably the forecast view. I can look at today and see my calendar integrated in the forecast. And we have an exam next week that I need to just follow up on. This is a reminder that's a repeating task, another strength of OmniFocus over something like Notion, where, this can just remind me to, if I had a moment in class where maybe I had some synthesis around an idea, I want to go ahead and create a voice memo so that if I'm looking to do some writing in the future, that's ready to go. My son has soccer practice later today. I have a pickleball appointment, and my Lego club has a call later tonight. And I just love that I can see all of this in one place, which is something that I think is really unique to OmniFocus that I love. Of course, the review is incredible. As I alluded to, I did eventually make my way over to Notion and try using tasks and projects there for a while. So I've just recently sort of switched back to OmniFocus, and I'm really enjoying cleaning everything up again and reusing it as I move forward.
What kind of drives your day when you're in OmniFocus? Are you using forecast, or do you have other perspectives that are kind of your go-to next action list?
Yeah, great question, Tim. Definitely, I start with the forecast view. I'm often lucky if I can just kind of keep up with what's due on any given day. There's not often a lot of margin. I've learned as we've gotten older, or at least as I've gotten older, I should say, there's a time in life where you get so committed to so many things that there's really just not space. A lot of your day is just maintenance about keeping the thing going month to month and year round. And so I found the forecast view to be the most helpful, but I did want to show some of the perspectives that I use are pretty common. Where, I'll click here and it'll dive into my nonprofit or to Lego stuff. I love the ability to filter out things on the weekend. Like, I really need to work on the thing in the backyard or fix the thing in the garage and not get distracted and then tempted to be pulled into like work related things. I really try hard to keep those areas of life set aside. So yeah, those are some of the perspectives that I use, but forecast is definitely my go-to at the beginning of the day.
Are you linking OmniFocus and Notion together? Are there like OmniFocus actions that take you right into the appropriate place in Notion, or how do those two kind of fit together at a very sort of practical level?
Yeah, so this is something I've just been diving into, is how to make the two talk. As I go into, I'm actually forgetting where that was now. I think in my areas here, some of these in the list view, I've been able to use Hookmark, thanks to Tim for his help on this. And the only issue with OmniFocus is if I grab the link and put it in Notion, it doesn't see it as a link, a sort of a web-based URL. So we have to use this workaround where we go, let me see if I can do this in real time. We'll give this a try. We're going to grab this and hit copy as link for booking an appointment to go play pickleball. And then over here in Notion, we'll put that under physical health. And if I paste this here, it's not going to like that. It doesn't actually show up as, it won't take me somewhere.
Actually, if you go back to OmniFocus.
Yeah, thanks. There we go. That's what it is.
And then do Control-H to bring up Hookmark. And then when you click on the menu, if you hold down the Option key.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, then you can create what's called a universal link, and that will work pretty much anywhere. I just learned of that new feature myself. I was talking to Luc Baudouin, who's the fellow behind Hookmark, and yeah, he introduced me to that feature.
Yeah, and so there it is. Thank you so much, Tim. That we click on that, and that should take us back, sure enough, to that task. So that workaround is pretty simple and has been something that I've just begun to unpack, but I think having, again, any kind of reduced friction we can have in our systems is really, really useful. I think often, well, I actually think there's use cases for both, going from review the grant schedule for my nonprofit would be a task in OmniFocus, but having the hook mark over to my dashboard with the grant database and timelines over in Notion, that's an obvious, like a really nice thing that I could drop in the notes field down here. But then vice versa, there's also times where you want to add some tasks to a project and keep them in OmniFocus, and you could do the same thing there backwards.
And I believe everything in Notion is linkable, so you can link to a specific record of a database table or to the note in Notion that's all encompassing or something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely right. You can open up a page. Here's a page about hobbies, and then all I have to do is go to share and then copy link. And as soon as I do that, I can then go back over to OmniFocus and paste. And now I've got a web-based link there that I can grab, and it should take me right back to where I want to be. It's grabbing the web browser version, but that's the same space there.
And that'll work on the iPhone, iPad, any mobile device as well.
Yeah. So when you're on the go, that always makes finding things on the phone, obviously, is I find to be significantly more difficult, when you're just have less real estate on the screen. And so, yeah, it's been really, really, really helpful to be able to start to explore what's possible between those two sides of things.
And just to emphasize what Andy's showing here is people will sometimes complain about how the note feature of OmniFocus is not its strongest feature. Let's say, but in some ways, I think it's good that there isn't a robust notes editor in there because it might be tempting to use it. I find the best use of the note field is to link to, in this case, Notion, and then you've got this really rich environment where you can do your tracking and planning and ideating and all those sorts of things, where OmniFocus is tapping you on the shoulder and saying, go over to Notion and look at what you captured, or, come up with some ideas or something like that. And kind of OmniFocus has done its job at that point. You don't have to, it's reminded you to make use of what's in Notion, and then it can kind of step out of the picture for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that I do most of my deep work in Notion, but when you sit down to do anything creative, if you haven't captured everything in your life, inevitably you'll get distracted. And that's where I find OmniFocus is so incredibly powerful, is it kind of acts as like a gatekeeper for me to make sure that those small things, small or large, but the things that are just that keep our lives running are captured and that they're prioritized, which is equally important, so that when I'm over in Notion, I can just like allow my ideas to flow.
And I'm guessing your Notion system didn't start off this way, that this is something you've built up over a long time. And for those of you who are brand new to Notion, you don't go to like 0 to 100 in a day or something like that. So just maybe find a few specific use cases for it, things where you say, I really want a convenient place to keep notes about X, and then you can always expand that usage over time.
100%. Yeah, you can open a new page and create a database and, just start typing in. And in my case, that could be the areas. Maria Poulin actually prefers not to put them in as a database because she doesn't want all that stuff at the top. She just does a page. You could have your family page with databases inside of that, and then you just start typing. And I kind of built them as I went and then kind of connected them on the back end.
And you could even use Notion without even using databases to start with. Just have it. Definitely. I know some companies even use it as an internal wiki where they want to keep all their sort of internal information for employees in one place, and it can work really well for that too.
Yeah, my nonprofit does that, and it's really helpful. I'll just give you a quick skim of it. Like all of our tasks and our meeting, our handbook, each of us has a custom homepage where we're pulling info from this whole thing that we most need help with. We haven't yet seen the calendar view of a database, but this is the calendar view and shows some of those things. So it's extremely powerful, but it all started with just like one thing, and then we stacked that block on top of it.
And there was a question earlier about if people are accessing information in Notion, if they need like a Notion account. Maybe if you could speak to that, because I know a lot of your use cases are data for you personally, but how does that work when you're sharing it with other people and collaborating with teams and things like that?
Yeah, I know I am actually not 100% on whether they need an account or not. It's free if they do. I'm pretty sure some of these can just be public. You just make this share to the web and then copy the web link. I'm off the top of my head not recalling if they need a free account to log in or not, but I definitely use it as a sharing tool all the time. I'm in charge of a committee here at the university, and we use it as our wiki where we're keeping our agendas and our meeting notes. My Lego club uses it and shares it with, dozens of people there. So it's been really, really powerful. The sharing feature is definitely one of its strongest features. The fact that it's all web-based as well, that I've gotten a lot of use out of.
Is there any way to print database views was one of the questions that came up.
That's actually a great question. I've never, I would assume so. I've not printed anything out of Notion. If we just go over here, we can go to export, and it does have a number of export options to PDF. And then obviously you could print from PDF there, which would be really, really useful. I have several students who use this to manage all of their classwork. They set up a database with the class, and then inside of the class, they make another database with all of their assignments. And then inside that database, they do the work for the assignment. And then they create a URL for that assignment and upload the URL. Nowadays, the students aren't printing very often. They freak out if you ask them to print something. But yeah, obviously there would be use cases where that would be useful, and I would probably explore the export to PDF option right there.
And I know Craft is often compared to Notion because on the surface they look somewhat similar, but there's one question about how it compares, and I can certainly speak to that as well. Because sometimes it can be difficult to decide, like, you want some sort of a note-taking app to use alongside OmniFocus, which one to choose. So, yeah, what kind of guided your decision there?
I actually had never heard of Craft before I got into Notion. And so Airtable, as I mentioned, was on my radar. And then a friend of mine said, man, I keep hearing about Notion. And then I got into it and I just loved it. And then I got so deep into Notion, I kind of like started turning off some of my inputs around me from different podcasts and things like that. And when I dove back in, I started hearing all about Obsidian and Craft. And while I was sort of deep in the Notion hole, it seemed like those had popped up. But I've never really had a reason to explore them because I've been able to do so much in this space.
I can speak to that as well. One key difference between Notion and Craft is Notion is designed to use databases, where Craft is essentially a note-taking app, and a very, very good one at that. And so there's certainly a lot you can do in Notion that's not possible in Craft. And the big difference as well is Notion is web-based, so you're working in this kind of real-time. Even when you're using the native app, you're essentially running a web browser within it. And whereas Craft is designed as a native app, and you can even be taking notes when you don't have an internet connection and so forth. So I think it's partially looking at what use cases you have. Partially it's personal preference with a lot of these tools. And you could even use both. There's nothing to say you couldn't be managing your nonprofit in Notion and taking your personal notes in Craft or something like that. So
definitely.
And that's one question. Does Notion work when you don't have an internet connection? Is there any offline access to Notion?
I've actually not explored that either. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
But I do know there's been, obviously we're not offline much these days, but I've definitely worked in my system on my computer offline before. And then obviously I'm assuming it just updates when you get back online. but yeah, that's actually a great question. Like for a flight or something like that, how much you're able to access things. I have the native app on my computer, and so um, I've never run into an issue with that. But now I want to research all these questions. These are good questions. It's just like being
Yeah.
in class.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for all the great questions. Jeff is asking more about your time blocking process. If you could
Yeah,
speak to that a bit, because yeah, that can be a really powerful practice in itself.
yeah, yeah. So I use Fantastical, and my tasks are in OmniFocus. And so when I'm going through that Notion shutdown routine, I'm pulling up Fantastical and essentially looking at how much time I have. Well, let me back up. I try to time block the whole week over the weekend, and block. Sometimes I'll block like 2 or 3 weeks if I know I have a project coming up where I'm seeing gaps on the calendar. I'll just like grab those now. I feel pretty passionately that we don't talk about time the way we do about money, where it is infinite, or it is not infinite rather. And so when I have open blocks, I try to grab them. So then what happens is, as I go through the week, hopefully those have been blocked out and are already in place. But then in my evening review at night, I'm basically just looking at what I've already blocked and asked, well, this thing today ran over and we didn't have time for everything. So I need to kind of figure out if I need to scooch everything backward, or if I need to just, it wasn't that important, it can wait a few more days and it goes back on the list. And then I'm looking at the to-do list on OmniFocus in terms of what's available and what I have said is due. And then I would try to make decisions, because where overwhelm comes in for me the most is when I have some unrealistic view of what's going to fit into tomorrow or even the next 2 or 3 days, where I just find so much value in like kind of cutting loose of that baggage mentally earlier in the process and going, I'm really disappointed that I'm not going to get to this for whatever reasons that is with that task or project. But looking at the calendar, I need to be present as a dad or for my students, or I need to get to my creative work, and this other thing is just going to have to wait. And if I can come to that conclusion earlier, it gives me more time to kind of feel vertically aligned with it. And then as I'm going through my day, I'm not sort of feeling like I'm failing all day long. So that process has been really, really powerful for me, and is definitely something I try to keep track of on a regular basis to stay on track with that habit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Andy. And I think one of the challenges of an app like OmniFocus is you can be adding actions till the cows come home. You can have hundreds or even thousands of actions in there, but it's not like the old days where we had a piece of paper and there was only so much space on the page. Yeah, so the time blocking, it sounds like it really sort of grounds that and sets you up for success rather than failure. Just on a side note, I make extensive use of estimated durations. And there's a great little script by Caitlin Salsky where you can take a view like your today view or something and add up all the durations for it. And if I've got 4 hours to work and 12 hours of actions to do, I know something, it's better to discover that sooner rather than later. And just it kind of like the time blocking, it kind of grounds the work and says, okay, what is most important, what will lead to a satisfying day, which ones do I really want to get done today, even though I'd kind of like to get all of them done. Notice you have some check boxes within Notion itself, and some of those kind of look like they're tasks or actions within Notion. How do you decide what becomes an action in OmniFocus versus a checkbox in Notion?
The checkbox thing for me has actually been most useful. I'll show you my teaching dashboard here. Like these are the classes that we teach in my division, and these are copies of those classes, sort of the current iteration, if you will. And so if I open up like this seminar that I'm in the middle of teaching right now, you'll see some checkboxes, but I use that feature here just basically to mark it as done, meaning like, let's scroll down I just taught this class last Tuesday. And so I'll just mark that as like complete. It's not so much a task as like a really good way to filter. So if I have a bunch of things there that are marked complete, I could also just filter by the date and say, I only want to see the classes from today forward so that I'm not scrolling through all these lectures that I've already delivered. That would be another way to do it. But sometimes it's just, there's like a visual and a kind of satisfying way of like clicking this off and knowing, oh, I can see these are done and these are not. We're getting to the end of the semester here. We only have a few left, which is kind of cool.
It looks in this context like it's a milestone you've reached, and there's a bunch of things you needed to do in order to get there. But now you can say, okay, this step of the journey is complete, and yeah, just use Notion to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Similarly, you could go in and trying to think of a good example, but you could just go in and add a checkbox for like, if you want to grab 7 things out of a database of 40 and filter by that are maybe a little harder to contextualize, but you want to have a little bit more human choice in there, like for maybe 3 to 4 diverse reasons, I want these 7 things. You could just add a checkbox, tick those 7, and then filter by that, and it would spit it out. So if the way you're choosing to filter is not as clean as like happened in the month of August, or is labeled this, or has a status of active, but was a little bit more of a complex use case, the checkbox can be really helpful.
Could you actually have OmniFocus linked to a filtered view of a table? So could you say, have an action, which is to say, review remaining classes and class schedule and not see the ones that have already been completed?
Yeah, I could definitely create that view and then link to it, grab the link for that view and then put that in OmniFocus, which would be great. I mean, I have OmniFocus templates for like, I used to try to run one for almost every class, like prep next Thursday's class, do these 4 things, make sure I've sent out the assignment in Canvas, et cetera, et cetera. And I found it really helpful to have exactly such views that you're referring to. One of the things that I could touch on here just very fast is the lesson plans. I created this. This is every lesson plan across every single class. So this database is extremely overwhelming. And like anything, if you don't filter it correctly, it's sort of a mess, just like OmniFocus can be if we're not very careful with using our perspectives there. But one of the things, like I teach snare drum across a 4-year curriculum. And so I can just add like a quick filter for instrument tag. And where is that? Right here. And then filter for, gosh, where did that go? I'll find it in a moment. But anyway, what that allows me to do is it allows me to see every use of snare drum across a 4-year curriculum. So when I'm doing design for like my entire student's experience over 4 years, I can like sort of just take those few weeks out of all these different classes. And that has been really powerful to see the through line of like how I'm teaching over a larger span of time.
There's a question, do you enter the dates in the course schedule by hand, or is there a better way of doing it? Do you have kind of an automation to fill in those fields for you?
Yeah, there's you just go to the date here and then you can select it. Like this is an actual date field, so a calendar will show up. What I usually do is I duplicate this and then I do manually change them, which is a hassle. Tim, I remember a long time ago, one of your guests had an OmniFocus script to like add a day to one of the dates because they were a teacher. And I remember grabbing that because every time you set up the semester, it's like if you're in a position where you're going to basically deliver the same lectures, you still have to get it to sync up to the current 6-month semester or whatever it is. And that is just kind of a waste of an hour. But yeah, right now I'm doing it manually, but I would love to figure out how to not do that. Give it a start date.
Maybe if we could have a quick peek at the AI capabilities before we go, because that's something I'm quite curious about as well. And that's definitely kind of the buzzword these days is all around the AI. And I know this was added to Notion quite recently.
I'll just go to my business up here and I've got a content calendar. And if we go down to the content calendar again, just reiterating, there's these views you can make of the databases, one of which is a calendar, which I really like. And I've gone ahead and created this content idea. And I can have all these, what category is it and what region, if I'm doing it for the university or my own work or whatever, and a status. But I went ahead and just typed this out just before the call. I think OmniFocus illustrates David Allen's principles from GTD. I also think Notion demonstrates the principles in building a second brain. And if I were to grab this, you can hit Ask AI, and I can just say make longer, and it's going to go ahead and fill in a lot of the sort of useful, data around OmniFocus featuring its features and functionalities align well, such as capturing tasks, organizing into projects and contexts, the things that we know to be true that I just didn't really want to take the time to have to say, but maybe I want this to be just a little bit longer. So I can click this, and now it will take that and expand on it even more. And, this was my connected idea that I sort of, I guess I came up with. Like, I've not seen anyone else make this connection between these two books and these two platforms. I'm sure someone out there has. But, once you put the seed of the idea down, you can just kind of skim through this and see, this could be a really useful abstract for a post prior to a longer talk. Perhaps Tim could have used this on the website for today's talk, but didn't have to maybe take the time to write that so extensively. So I can just choose replace selection. And now here back out on my content calendar, I grab this thing and I've got all that text right there.
Could this be used as an outline as well? Could it create an outline for a talk like the one you just did?
Yeah. So let me show you the options you get. I can improve the writing and grammar, shorter and longer. You can also change the tone. I haven't messed with this very much, but let's make this a little, I could turn this into an outline. Let's see what happens. Oh, about David Allen's GTD book. And it just grabs all of that for us. And let's go ahead and replace that. So there's the outline from the book. I'm assuming these are the chapters. And now I believe we can summarize that outline. It just does that there, but then I could probably go into each chapter and then ask it to do more. And it's pretty crazy. It's definitely something I'm still figuring out how to get the most out of. But
and this really points to the power of using Notion and similar apps as kind of an ideation tool, and not trying to kind of go through that process in OmniFocus, which is really about kind of moving the needle on things, not so much about generating the ideas. And so, yeah, it's really exciting to see how this is evolving. And yeah, I think like most people are still trying to figure out how to use this in a practical way. But yeah, really interesting to see that specific example.
We had an application due the other day for a thing at work, and I just needed to basically tell 10 individuals that they've been accepted in a very kind and friendly way. And as we know, that takes a certain amount of energy, and it matters to me what their experience is like on the other end. So I had this do it for me, and then I revised it. But it just saved me 10 minutes of sort of at the end of the day trying to come up with all that language.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, for so generously sharing everything you've learned around Notion and OmniFocus and productivity in general. And I really appreciate everybody who joined the live session. Lots of great sharing and questions. And thanks to all of you who are watching a recording of this session as well. And I hope to see you all again soon. Okay, take care. Bye for now.